September 1942. Sergeant Kenji Tanaka cursed the clinging mud that sucked at his canvas boots with every step. The air hung thick and humid, a suffocating blanket even in the pre-dawn gloom of Guadalcanal's interior. His unit, part of Major General Kiyotake Kawaguchi's detachment, had been slogging through this infernal jungle for days, cutting through dense foliage, scrambling over unseen roots. Fatigue gnawed at him, but beneath it burned a fierce, unwavering confidence. They were the Emperor's soldiers, honed in China, veterans of countless battles. And soon they would sweep the weak American bandits from this island. Kawaguchi himself had been clear. The Americans were soft, undisciplined, their fighting spirit already broken by the island's disease and the sheer shock of Japanese ferocity. Tanaka believed it. He'd seen the Allied propaganda, the depictions of soft Westerners. They were clearly no match for the Bushido spirit that burned in every one of his men. The objective was clear, a ridgeline, lightly defended, overlooking the Americans' main airfield. A single, decisive thrust would shatter their resolve, sending them fleeing back to their ships. This was to be a glorious, swift victory. But the jungle itself seemed to whisper warnings the men were too proud to heed. The march had been arduous, far slower than anticipated. Maps were unreliable, terrain unforgiving. Fatigue was creeping in, dulling their edge, but the commanders, high above, dismissed it. The enemy would be broken before they even felt the full weight of the assault. They couldn't know that every painful step deeper into the jungle was leading them not to a weak enemy, but to an unyielding wall of marine tenacity. The night of September 12th brought the first chilling surprise. After days of exhaustive maneuvering, Kawaguchi's weary troops finally reached the high ground overlooking the American airfield. Their intelligence reports had indicated a lightly held position, perhaps a few hundred men at most, probably demoralized. Tanaka's company was part of a flanking movement, cautiously advancing through the undergrowth. Then the silence shattered, not with the expected panic, but with a sudden, disciplined hail of fire. Machine guns ripped through the darkness, followed by the sharp crack of Garand rifles. They were met not by scattered resistance, but by a well-coordinated defense. Confusion rippled through the ranks. Prowling patrols reported American positions that seemed too strong, too numerous for what they had been told. Every probe met stubborn resistance, every attempted breakthrough repelled. "They are dug in deeper than reported," Tanaka heard a junior officer grumble, frustration seeping into his voice. "And their automatic fire. It is relentless." This wasn't the routed enemy they'd anticipated. This was an entrenched force, ready and waiting. The initial contempt began to curdle into a bewildered suspicion. This small, American force, no more than a battalion, was holding its ground with a tenacity that was deeply unsettling. As dawn broke on September 13th, the full scale of their miscalculation began to sink in. Wave after wave of Japanese assaults had been launched through the night, each met with devastating fire. The Americans, Marines, were not just holding their positions, they were pouring out a furious volume of lead. The ridge, initially dismissed as a minor obstacle, was proving to be a killing ground. Tanaka saw his comrades fall, riddled by bullets, or blown apart by mortar fire that seemed to fall with uncanny accuracy. The Japanese reputation for stealth and infiltration was being shredded by an enemy who seemed to anticipate their every move. Kawaguchi's orders remained resolute. Push forward, they must break. But the reality on the ground was far different. Accounts from surviving officers spoke of the Marines' stubborn defense. One company commander reported, "The Americans' firing is fierce, their determination unshaken. We underestimated their resolve." Tanaka himself witnessed men who had fought fearlessly in China hesitate, recoil, or even retreat under the relentless Marine firepower. The idea that these soft Americans would crumble was being brutally disproven with every fallen Japanese soldier. The confusion was deepening into a grudging, bitter respect. These devils were not fleeing, they were fighting. That night, September 13th, the battle reached its terrifying crescendo. Kawaguchi, desperate to break the deadlock, committed his reserves, ordering a series of furious, all-out banzai charges. Tanaka found himself screaming alongside his comrades, bayonet fixed, charging uphill into a hail of tracer fire. The screams of "Tenno Heika Banzai" were met with a storm of bullets, grenades, and the chilling roar of the Marines. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in the darkness, a brutal, desperate ballet of steel and flesh. The smell of blood and cordite was overpowering. "They fought like demons," a wounded Japanese sergeant later recounted, his voice hoarse with trauma. "Even when we reached their lines, they clawed, bit, and struck with anything they could find. They would not yield an inch." Tanaka saw Marines, wounded and outnumbered, still fighting, still pushing back. The attacks continued, wave after wave, into the early hours of September 14th. Every time the Japanese seemed on the verge of overwhelming a position, the Marines would counter, often with desperate, suicidal charges of their own. The sheer, unyielding ferocity of the defense was unlike anything Tanaka had ever witnessed. This wasn't just resistance. It was an unbreakable will. As the first faint streaks of dawn touched the ridge on September 14th, the Kawaguchi detachment was a shattered force. The banzai charges had failed. 3,000 men had been sent against 840, and the Americans still held their ground. Tanaka, his uniform torn and bloodied, looked around at the devastation. The ridge was littered with the bodies of his comrades, a testament to a sacrifice that had yielded nothing. The air was thick with the stench of death, and a profound, chilling silence had settled over the battlefield. The only sound was the distant cawing of birds and the groans of the wounded. Kawaguchi, in a rare moment of candor, would later acknowledge the truth of what had transpired. The devil dogs of Edson's Ridge. They fought with a tenacity that defied belief. The contempt, the confusion, the grudging respect, all had collapsed into a profound sense of awe, tinged with fear. The enemy they had so carelessly dismissed had proven to be a formidable, unbreakable foe. The Japanese belief in their own invincible spirit had been shattered on that blood-soaked ridge. It was a defeat that echoed far beyond the immediate battlefield, planting a seed of dread that would grow with every subsequent encounter. The Americans were not soft. They would not break. And the war for Guadalcanal, they now understood, had only just begun.